100 years ago, during the Harlem Renaissance, this country was still deep in Jim Crow. I mean, anti lynching laws had not passed, black people had no real political protection, and yet, black artists, thinkers, educators, and entrepreneurs were creating anyway. And some had left the country, that's true, but many stayed. And some built wealth, influence, and institutions right here under conditions that were objectively brutal. So now it's 2026, and yes, things feel bleak in like all kinds of ways, but if our people could think clearly and create boldly and speak truthfully in that moment, then surely we can figure out how to do the same thing right now. Nowadays, so many people cut each other off at the first sign of offense. You've probably seen videos on social media about people saying they cut off their family and they're preserving their peace. But in 1927, Mary McLeod Bethune didn't walk away when Eleanor Roosevelt crossed the line. She named what hurt, she explained why, and she preserved the bond. And then what she did next is a communication masterclass that every conversation needs. I'm Thais Kajumbo. Before we get started, like this video, subscribe, and join me in the Reading Lounge, where we read together and we can talk through ideas that need more space than these social media streets will allow. In this series, I'm looking at books in history to look at how Black women kept their footing in hard times and what that can teach us now. That brings me to this scene. So this moment comes from The First Ladies, written by Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray. In this scene, it opens up in 1927 in New York. We're watching a private lunch between Mary McLeod Bethune and Eleanor Roosevelt. These are two women who were connected by friendship, politics, and an unequal power dynamic shaped by race. This is not a safe conversation. Access to white political power in this era was fragile, and a single misstep could cost influence, funding, protection, and that's what makes what Mrs. Bethune does here extraordinary. A crucial conversation has three things: high stakes, strong emotions, and differing perspectives. This moment has all three. And most Black people, especially Black women in that era, would have chosen silence because silence was safer. But Mrs. Bethune chooses something else. She chooses presence. I'm going to read a little bit to give you a little bit of context before I launch into what I see. Mrs. Bethune, Mary, and Eleanor had met several times now. They have corresponded in writing and they have met in person several times. And this was a time when they were meeting at Marino's restaurant. They had just finished greeting each other and enjoying the moment of being back in each other's company. And they've met each other several times, and they have just agreed that they are friends and that they can call each other by their first names. So every time they had greeted each other, it was Mrs. Roosevelt or Mrs. Bethune. I'm going to read a passage just so you can get a little context for Mrs. Bethune's confidence. Since I decided as a child how I wanted white people to address me, I've never given a white person permission to call me anything except for Mrs. Bethune. With this lovely woman before me now, however, I feel differently. There are moments when I hardly notice the difference in our skin tones. So this kind of formality, Mrs. Bethune and Mrs. Roosevelt, when we've laughed about everything from our favorite foods to my weight, feels too formal. When there is a pause in our conversation, I say, I really enjoy you, Mrs. Roosevelt, and consider you a friend. Her smile is wide when she says, I feel the same way. Well, I've been thinking, given the candor of our conversations, the formal use of our names seems too rigid among friends. Perhaps it's time to address each other by Eleanor and Mary. She clasps her hands together. Oh, Mrs. Bethune, I mean Mary. We share a laugh again. I'd be honored. So that gives you context. I'm setting the scene. They've just agreed that they're friends and that they're going to call each other by their first names. And then because Eleanor is the wife of the governor, so Franklin Roosevelt is the governor of New York at the time, she has been speaking to him about what they can do to help colored people in the United States, especially in New York. So Eleanor has come up with this idea that she has thought about with Franklin, and she's ready to present it to Mary. And she's even more excited now that they've established that they're friends. So she launches into this whole monologue about what this project is and what her idea is. I'm going to start with a passage with what Eleanor says so that you can get an understanding of the conversation. that leads to a crucial conversation. Eleanor says, "For a long time now, I've wondered about the Republican Party and whether they're meeting their responsibilities to the colored people of this country. It's certainly no longer the party Abraham Lincoln represented, and that's why I've never been able to understand why the Democratic Party hasn't tried to appeal to colored voters. We have so much to offer." My smile begins to fade. Does she really not know that while some Republicans may ignore us, many of the men and women in her party go far beyond that and hold appalling views of Negroes? She plows ahead, unaware of my diminishing enthusiasm. My husband shares my concerns about the colored population, and as the governor of New York, he has made inroads into helping Negroes during these hard economic times. If he runs for president, he's already laid out a national plan following along the same lines. Her words tumble out so fast that I wonder if she's registering my reaction at all. I press back in my chair. So Eleanor is completely oblivious. She's so excited about being Mary's friend, and she's so excited about her proposal that she's just spilling her guts. She's not even paying attention to how the message is being received. When Eleanor quiets, I nod slowly, but my expression and stance do not waver. Comprehension finally flickers across her face, and her bright eyes dim, and deep lines surface on her forehead. "Is something wrong?" she asks. I am still reeling and unsure where to begin. "You're asking me to consider campaigning for a Democratic candidate?" "Yes," she answers, although now her voice falters. I cannot believe the timing of this moment. Eleanor and I have just declared ourselves friends, close enough for me to ask her to call me Mary, yet after this little speech, I wonder if she has ever seen me. Pushing my half-eaten plate aside, I lean forward. I want to be close enough so that Mrs. Roosevelt will not only hear, but fully understand how much and why she has offended me. So, as you can see from my book, I have marked it up, and one of the things that I wrote under here was that I love that she didn't back down and she addressed the situation head on and immediately. And this is a part of a crucial conversation, is recognizing what's happening and being willing to deal with it head on. Bethune senses the shift immediately. Her smile fades, her body responds, she grows quiet. And this matters because Black women are often trained to override those signals. We're taught to keep the room comfortable, to keep the access open, to keep the peace, and, to not be the angry Black woman. We're taught all of these things to just try to keep white people comfortable and keep people comfortable. But Mrs. Bethune trusts herself instead. She understands something that many of us forget. If your body notices the rupture, then the conversation is already crucial. So she addresses it immediately. Like I said, she doesn't wait. She doesn't vent sideways. She doesn't store this offense for later and think about it. She immediately leans forward and tells Eleanor clearly and directly that she has been offended. So let's be honest about what that means in 1927. A Black woman confronting a white woman with proximity to presidential power without rage, without apology, without retreat. This isn't emotional impulsivity. This is disciplined courage. Disciplined courage. And it caused me to reflect, because there are times when I have not had the courage that I needed to stand up for myself in the workplace. And sometimes in other conversations where I have been offended, I tuck that down and, I stew on it because I'm afraid that I'm in that moment, I might not have the middle ground, the calm that I need to say what I need to say without taking it too far, especially in a work setting. And especially in work settings where I'm often the only Black woman or the only person of color in the room. And so that makes it even more crucial and even more intense for me. And I'm sure that you have probably felt that way too. So let me know in the comments if there are times, if you can think of a time where you were offended and you wanted to address it immediately, but you swallowed it instead. Okay. I want you to take note here, because this is where the masterclass deepens. Mrs. Bethune does not accuse Eleanor of malice. She names a pattern, one Black people know intimately, being presumed upon, spoken for, and recruited without consent. So I'm going to share a little bit more about what Mrs. Bethune says to her. This is Eleanor's perspective. "I am reeling. I apologize, Mary. I have offended you. I can see that. I plead, my voice cracking and becoming unpleasantly high. I am a little miffed. She pauses and then says my name as if she's forcing herself to. Eleanor. Maybe more than a little. I hope you know that I would never intentionally do anything to harm our friendship. This is important to me above all else, I squeak. I do know that you are invested in our friendship, she says, yet her words sound cautious. I am, I reiterate, and then ask, can you accept my apology? Obviously, I've made a terrible blunder. I still don't know the nature of my misstep, but it seems best to move ahead rather than step backward. I'd like to do that, but first we need to discuss it. Mary's tone remains even and firm. A waiter approaches at this inopportune moment, and I wave him away, but Mary stops me and instead instructs him to refill our drinks. There is no way to move forward until we look back, not only to the beginnings of our own relationship, but to the history behind all these tricky politics, she says once the man has departed. The request you just made on behalf of Governor Roosevelt feels like a wall that we've got to scale. Either we can climb it together, or, I'm sorry to say, that wall will remain between us, becoming a barricade to friendship. I'm going to pause right here because this part was so enlightening to me. I love that Mary was able to see that a wall had been erected and that it would only come down if they scaled it together. So she remained open, and that's what made me want to make this video and show that this is a masterclass in crucial conversations, because she's offended, she acknowledges it immediately, but she remains open and she's willing. She values the friendship so much that she remains open and willing to scale that together. And I find that a lot of times, especially nowadays, I see people all over social media, and I've got people in my own family who say, if I'm offended, I'm just going to cut them off. They just don't get the access to me. I'm protecting my peace. And I understand that, but I also understand that we were not meant to be alone. We are meant to be in community, and nobody is perfect. As long as there are humans in a relationship, somebody is going to be offended at some point about something. And if you really value the relationship, then you've got to be vulnerable enough to say that you were offended. Now, I'm saying you, but I'm talking to myself too, because there have been times where I have swallowed offense and I have just like, oh, well, it's not that big a deal. It's not that big a deal. But then so many not that big a deals becomes a big thing, and it becomes a fracture in a relationship, and something small or several small things have come to something big, and now all of a sudden the relationship is broken when it didn't have to. I'm going to go back to the text. Eleanor, do you have any sense of why I'm upset? She's asked the very question I'm most mortified to attempt to answer, but I must offer some explanation. So I say, I overstepped my bounds and asked too much of you? No, she says with a shake of her head. In my world, a friend can ask anything of another friend. Whether or not the friend can grant the request is another matter entirely, but there would never be anger for asking. I am not upset with you for making your appeal. Then I'm embarrassed to admit that I don't know what I've done wrong. Eleanor, she says, and I realize she will not say anything more until I meet her eyes. When I look up, she continues, what upsets me is the presumptuousness with which you ask for my support. Do you realize this is the first time we've ever talked about anything political? It's true. I don't recall an exchange about our distinct political parties. I deliberately skirt the topic to focus on our common ground rather than our differences. She continues, except for the fact that I'm a Republican, we've never discussed my personal political sensibilities. Certain terrible racial issues and struggles women face, yes, but politics, no. So without speaking to me, you assumed several things. First, you assumed what I feel about the Republican and Democratic parties. For all you know, I could be satisfied with our progress under Republicans. You're right, I reply with my voice heavy with apology and regret. I just assumed you would be as frustrated with the Republicans as I am. Yes, it was then you made a second assumption. You took for granted that simply because you asked me to do something, I would necessarily agree and follow your command. I gasp. My hand flies to my mouth. Did I approach our conversation with that level of audacity? Mary continues, you gave no thought to my individual will or the thousands of colored folks to whom I am beholden. So let me make this clear. I believe in the policies of the Republican Party, even if some have fallen short. When I met with Mary today, I actually assumed she'd accept. But why? Thinking back on my offer to Franklin and Lewis to reach out to her, I felt confident that I could deliver her and the colored vote along with her. Before I can offer another apology, she says, but there is a final assumption that you made, and it's one that Negroes often face. It's one that wounds us perhaps more than any other. White folks, even well-meaning ones, routinely presume they know what's best for us, and it pains me to say it, Eleanor, but that's exactly what happened here. So Eleanor apologizes again. She recognizes what she has done and how deeply she has offended, the assumptions that she's made, and she agrees with Mary. Mary sighs a heavy, deep breath. Only then does she speak. Well, you might be in for a hard conversation here, and it might pain you to hear about some of my experiences with Southern Democrats and the Klan, but let us see if we can scale this wall together. Mrs. Bethune refuses to individualize what is structural. That move does two things at once. It tells the truth and it keeps the conversation open. This is where the configuration shows up. This is wisdom arranged for survival. So even though Eleanor apologizes quickly, Mary doesn't rush past the moment. She insists on context, on history, on meaning. Because Mrs. Bethune understands something critical, apologies without understanding don't prevent future harm. They just speed past it. Resolution without clarity is temporary. That is such an important point. And I have harmony as one of my core strengths. And so I want to make sure that there's peace and that everybody stays good. So I know that I have glossed past things without the clarity that's needed. But the most important thing, or something that's really interesting, is that Bethune doesn't sever the relationship, and she also doesn't sacrifice herself to keep it. She says, let's see if we can scale this wall together. That's not a compromise. That's a conditional collaboration. That's a relationship with integrity. So it's important to remember the time that we're in. Jim Crow, no legal protection, real danger. Bethune's clarity is not theoretical. It's the ancestral intelligence applied under pressure. It's what leadership looks like when there were no safety nets, only discernment, only discipline, only community. So Black women today are often told that naming harm is divisive or exhausting or ungrateful, or we're playing the race card, or why do you have to bring up race? And, I don't see color. And, why do you always have to bring those things up? Or why are you trying to make this something bigger than it's not? All the things that we've heard before. Mrs. Bethune shows us something else. She shows us that addressing harm early is energy conservation. How much of your energy has gone to trying to keep white people feeling secure, keep them feeling comfortable? How much energy have you used up shrinking yourself, keeping quiet because you don't want to rock the boat, or you're afraid of what the consequences will be, or you're afraid of fracturing relationships? How much of your energy have you used? Just think about it for a minute. But naming patterns is clarity. Saying what you see, what's real, brings clarity. And staying in a relationship only where truth is allowed is wisdom. So the key takeaways are, number one, to trust your internal signal. Your body notices before your mind. You might feel it in your chest. You might feel it in your shoulders or your back. You might feel it in your stomach. You might feel it in your head. But trust that. Trust your body, what your body is telling you. Then speak while the moment is still alive. Do not delay. Don't wait until next week or next month, because something that was really impactful to you may have not even been a blip on somebody else's radar. So here you come 2 months later saying, do you remember when you said such and such? Well, that really offended me. And they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about, right? So speak while the moment is still alive. And then stay only where honesty is possible, because access without respect that's not progress, okay? So this week, I want you to practice one Mrs. Bethune level choice. When something feels off, don't swallow it. Don't store it. I want you to ask yourself, what would it look like to tell the truth with clarity and dignity right now? You come from people who built brilliance under far harsher conditions than these. You are not asking for too much. You are remembering how much you already know. So as I wrap up, I want to be clear about something. Conversations like this about power, history, harm, and clarity don't fully belong in the comment section. They need context. They need room to breathe, and they need community. So that's why I created the Reading Lounge, a book club and a conversation space for thoughtful, like minded women who want to talk honestly about what we're reading, what we're navigating, and what we're carrying. It's a space where we can speak freely, where we can look back together, we can think forward together, and we can wrestle with these ideas that don't survive the noise of social media. We don't need anybody trying to cancel us or come for us in the comments. If this conversation resonated with you, if you're craving that depth instead of discourse, if you're craving reflection instead of reaction, then I'd love to invite you to join us. So the link is below. Come into the room, come into the conversation. Peace.